So we can just carry on the narrative. It says, all these things Yeshua said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, he said nothing to them without using a parable. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables, and I will say what has been hidden since the creation of the universe. Where does that remez come from? What is he quoting? I'll tell you what. Why don't we read it together, and then you can help me understand. Oh, nice and long one. Let's read the beginning and see how we go. Okay, it says, listen, my people, to my teaching. Turn your ears to the words from my mouth. I will speak to you in parables and explain mysteries from the days of old. What's the point of him talking in parables?
To explain the teaching.
To explain the mysteries. What's the mystery? We've only been studying it for like 5 weeks. God's kingdom. How does it work? How does it relate? How do we fit into this narrative? Think of something now. How many of you would love to sit at the feet of God and ask him questions? Say, Father, how does this kingdom work? How you're reigning, I just don't understand how everything fits together. What's with the evil that's running around? What's with the good people? Father, is this about covenant? Is it not about covenant? Father, where do we fit in? How does it all work together? And then you listen to your rabbi. And he sits and he talks to them about someone who went to go sow some seed. He says, sometimes the enemy is going to sow seed. He says sometimes there's going to be a plant that replicates like you won't believe, and that's going to be like the kingdom. Sometimes it's about having a meal together. He says, I want you to understand this relationship. Verse 36. Then he left the crowds and went into the house. Sorry, back in Matthew 13. His Talmidim approached him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. He answered, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. As for the good seed, these are the people who belong to the kingdom. And for the weeds are the people who belong to the evil one. The enemy who sows them is the adversary, and the harvest is at the end of the age. How do you know, besides him telling you, that this is about the end of the age? Remember, I gave you a key word. Whenever you hear Son of Man, you know 9 times out of 10 he's talking about end times. How do you know that? Because it's Daniel 7. When he comes on the clouds and every knee will bow. It is not a secret gathering of anything. He will come and everybody will know. Different to the 1 Thessalonians 4 narrative, yes? Okay? Or the man who comes when he talks about in the Matthew 25 when the groom comes in the middle of the night to fetch his bride. It's a secret thing. Daniel 7 is not a secret thing. Alright? He says, the enemy who sows him is the adversary, and the harvest is at the end of the age, and the harvesters are the angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up in a fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will collect out of the kingdom all the things that cause people to sin, and all the people who are far from. What's the next word? Okay, if you're not reading from a CJB or any Messianic other one, far from. Give me a New King James or a NIV or an NLT. We are at the end of 41. Far from? Okay, well, do sin and do evil. Mike, what do you have? All who practice lawlessness. Lawlessness. So someone, again, without a Torah. Alright? That should make you nervous. The kingdom has rules. Those who are in the kingdom understand the rules. Why? Because, say again? Okay? Who's sitting on the throne? Alright, do you want to serve your king or don't you? Alright, to not sound like a parent right now. How many parents, us who were teenagers not so long ago, did your parents ever look at you and go, my house, my rules? Did you understand that meant if you want to do whatever you want, whenever you want, you need to move out? How many of you were willing to move out? And then you realized you enjoy food and clothing and washing and all types of other fun things. There were benefits of the kingdom provided. You understand how we work? Sometimes as stroppy teenagers, we want all the benefits without the responsibility. Remember, I told you the kingdom of heaven is about three things. First comes revelation. After revelation comes, first comes redemption, then comes revelation, and then with revelation and redemption comes responsibility. You have the blessing of being in the kingdom. Trust me, the king is still on the throne. Okay? If you don't go according to the rules of the kingdom, this verse, Yeshua here says, all the people who are far from Torah, who are lawless. Now, don't twist this narrative. Don't tell people that if they don't follow Torah, they will never be in heaven. If you could achieve salvation by works, Messiah would not have had to die for you. Salvation is a gift. You come to salvation by grace through faith. By grace through faith. Once you believe, you have a responsibility. What are you going to do with your faith? Let's make it simple. If you are truly a believer, hopefully you will not run around and shoot other people. Good church practice. Numbers go up. Who knew? You will not steal from people. Kind of get the gist of this? There are certain things that as kingdom believers you have to adhere to. The difference being, some of us make excuses for the mitzvot we don't want to keep. And that's not about the kingdom, that's about you. Well, I just don't think that applies anymore. All the other stuff applies, all written at the same time, and now you tell me that Sabbath doesn't? Keep 9 out of the 10 commandments? 9 are valid and the one's not? We lose the point. But be careful. If you run around being lawless, Messiah will say it later. Not everybody who calls out Lord, Lord, Lord will enter into the kingdom. Get away from me, you who practice lawlessness. You see, the kingdom is not simply about proclaiming who is king. The enemy knows who is the king. The enemy knows who God is. What's the difference between you and them? It's a little bit more than that. Your relationship. You with me? All right. It's in verse 42. And they will throw them into the fiery furnace where people will wail and gnash their teeth or grind their teeth. It's a sign of mourning. Okay, if you're thrown into the fire, wailing and grinding your teeth, is that the response you hear coming out of the fire? No. There's a twofold issue here. Wailing and gnashing the teeth is twofold. Number one, those going in. And the other, those watching others go in. When you make a separation, some for destruction and some for life, God willing, you won't see anybody that you love on the other side. Or in our case, Chas v'chelila, God forbid, you won't be sitting on the other side watching your family members go to life or you go to destruction because of your choice. I want you to think of Pharaoh. Running into the Red Sea. Or Pharaoh watching his son die. The regret that he should have or must have felt in that moment because of his choice might give us a little bit of a moment of what we might feel, God forbid. There are just moments that we need to understand that this separation thing, God didn't want it. It's a choice. Now there's also no middle ground here. Those who belong to God, go to God. Those who don't. What about those who are undecided? What about those who are still, well, maybe one day when I'm older? What about those with excuses? Where do they fit? Is there? I don't really want the kingdom right now, maybe when I'm 45. I'm talking about the time when it's already been plucked and that the harvest is in. Right now there's mercy, but you don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. Those angels could appear half an hour from now and say, that's it, it's done. For those to life, for those to destruction or freedom. Exactly. I'm just excusing it, I'm going to go the other way. You're either in or you're out. It's a simple reality. I need you to let that sink in. There is no if, maybe, or but, or maybe later, or if you are still deciding whether to follow God or give Him your life or not, you are in the other camp. If you have given your life to God, you better see the fruit therein, you're in the other camp. You cannot sit on the fence in salvation. There is no in-between line here. You either belong to Him or you belong to the other guy. It says, verse 43, then the righteous will shine forth like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let him hear. One of those lovely biblical statements, if you have ears, please hear. And you think, obvious. But how many of you, or how many of us, shall I say, let's personalize this, that when God speaks, you use your ears. See, children can hear you and not do anything about it. Have you ever spoken to someone and they've heard everything they said and yet done nothing? What is your normal follow-up question, parents? Did you hear me? So what am I really asking? Yes. What are you doing about what I've just said? Your response to what you've been taught, what you've been told, is about doing something with it. It's not about understanding it and going, intellectualizing it. It's not about developing a new philosophy about it. It's about understanding the dynamic and doing something with it. Let's make this personal. The kingdom of heaven is about you. Those who have ears, what does that statement mean to you? Shema? Hear and obey? What else? This is interactive, guys.
It's like when they got to the waters of Mara, Adonai said to them, if you will listen intently to the voice of Adonai, do what He considers right.
You have the instructions for life, yeah.
Yeah, basically, it's a Torah, it's like hear and obey, but it's so easy to to hear and then think I'm doing it, but I'm doing it my own way. And to be very careful to align myself to what did he say, and what's his will, and get myself in that.
It's a very good point that Billy brought up. Is that we don't fulfill the mitzvah according to the way we understand it, we fulfill the mitzvah according to the way God understood it. Right? When your parents tell you to clean the house or no pocket money, and you come there and you did a half job, and you were like, but I cleaned. I wiped all the stuff that was on the counter onto the floor. I packed all the dirty dishes in a pile, they're still there, but it's neater, and I ruffled my blanket. So we're good. I cleaned. And your dad smiles and goes, no. Whose standard do we use?
It's God's standard.
You've got to use God's standard. So to understand what that means, what this means, what did it mean for Yeshua? What did it mean for his disciples? What does this correlate? How does God understand what he's stating here? And this is what you need to ponder. This is what we need to think about. In verse 44, it says, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure in a field, or hidden in a field. A man found it, hid it again, then in great joy went out and sold everything he had and bought that field. Now I'm like, first thing, the kingdom of heaven tells you, where did he find the treasure? Okay, on earth, if we want to go in, was it on top of a rock or was it in the ground? So it was a hidden truth, wasn't it? So he had to go digging. What was he doing digging? So, okay, maybe he was preparing soil. Maybe someone told him, hey, there's a story that there's something there. Do you think maybe he was looking for it? Or he was looking for something? And he finds something so amazing. He freaks out. I love that part. He digs it, he puts it back in the ground. This is amazing! I mean, yeah, find this, oh, look at my lovely Ferrari. And he goes and he gives up everything. His response is, he went out in great joy, sold everything he owned to buy that field. When you find this truth that seemed to be right there, but you didn't know about it, it was hidden, it was right in this place, would you give up everything? Everything you had, just so that you can hold on to it. Everybody else sees a field. You see something else. They think I'm mad. This guy's crazy. He sold everything he had and he bought just that patch of land. I mean, has he lost his mind? It doesn't make sense to the world. But he said that hidden treasure which you find, how important is this kingdom to you? Is it worth more than everything you have? Or when God tells you, give it up, do we go, I'll give you that, I'll give you that, I'll give you this, but really don't ask me for that because I'm still kind of fond of that. Let's think about it from the reverse perspective. God takes something so precious and he takes it and he hides it for you. Send something or somewhere along your path so that you go and dig at the exact spot and you find it. And he says, this is my most precious gift, it's for you. All you need to do is go sell everything you have so that you can come and you can buy this field. Then it's yours. Nah. Thanks, but no thanks. I think sometimes we miss the point. You think this thing that was hidden, this treasure, could also be an interesting little parallel to mean Messiah that was come down to earth, hidden in plain sight until you realize who he is. And he says, Lech acharai, come and follow me, come be like me. Would you give up everything? And sadly we don't. He says, if you did, you would have ownership of something so much more. It's a hidden treasure. Verse 45 says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant on the lookout for fine pearls. On finding one very valuable pearl, he went away, sold everything he owned, and bought it. Now, of course, my hamsters don't just let anything go, so how do we know? How many of you know how pearls are made? All right, Nathan.
So you get like the clam, right? And then like a speck of dust or like a foreign object will go into it, and then over
First explain to me what is an oyster. Does every oyster does every oyster bear make pearls?
No.
No. Okay? The ones you eat, are those the ones who make pearls? No. Okay, you shouldn't be eating oysters anyway, Nathan. Trick question. Alright. So there are only specific ones that you have to go and look for, correct? Alright. Is an oyster a seashell? Is it just a shell? No. It's a living organism, right? Okay, and then something like Nathan says, something all of a sudden creeps up and sits on its mouth, or the bed, we could say. Right? Sand? Only if the sand has a parasite. Okay? It can shake and it can get rid of the sand, it can get rid of whatever it wants, except if there's a parasite that's lodged into the sand and this thing tries to make its home in the oyster bed. What does it do then, Nate?
Then it like tries to defend itself by covering it in like, I don't know, gooey stuff.
Alright, actually, it tries to it secretes something called mica and actually tries to get rid of it by putting it up. And that's the same, how did they put it? They said, oysters that make pearls secrete the same color mica as the outside of their shell. Alright? So here's some interesting fun facts. This oyster has a shell, the foot, which is the squishy part, and the mantle, which is around the squishy part. It's made up of 3 parts. It has a heart and 3 kidneys plus colorless blood. 3 kidneys. Who knew? Right? It has eyes all over the shell apparently, so when something comes along, it clams shut. And specifically, how long do they live, do you think? 1 billion? No. Alright, so the cultivated ones, on average in fresh water, 1 to 6 years. They say anything from 5 to 20, but this is an interesting fun fact that I found. The best or the biggest pearl-producing oysters are found off, I think it's the north coast in Australia. How long does it take to produce a pearl, the biggest pearl? 7. With God, it's got to be. 7 years of trying to get rid of this parasite to produce a pearl. Are they all symmetrical? Are they all the same size and shape? No. How do I know the difference between a fake pearl and a real one? Fake one is? The real ones generally aren't. But also what else? Okay?
It's completely spherical, it's no
No, they said that they're actually odd shaped. The real ones, right? No, the real ones are odd shaped, the fake ones are round. But fake pearls are actually smooth. Right? Real ones are rough. Okay? So we sit and we look at that. Out of when they went diving, they say on average, what do you think the chances are of finding one in the wild? Finding a clam with an oyster inside of it that's been going for roughly an amount of time to be able to get a pearl. They say on average 1 in 10,000. So please understand that when this guy is talking about a guy, imagine the process that has gone on to get to the place where we have this perfect pearl before the merchant even finds it. How do I know a clam has a pearl? Yeah, you have to open it, right? They close at any thread. So you dive and snorkeling, you come down and you're like, no, no, no. Yeah, you don't have to break them when you open them. Apparently the professionals really know how to do it without hurting it. They actually cultivate pearls in that way. I learned a lot about pearls. I think it's in water with parasites so that they will continue to produce it. But you're sitting there and you go through this whole process and the merchant just pitches up and he goes, oh, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant on the lookout for fine pearls. What did God have to do to produce that fine pearl? And you're coming out, this man is looking, he's seeking for the best one, on finding one very valuable pearl. He went away, sold everything, bought it. This is something God created. Something so beautiful, something that is not perfectly symmetric, not smooth to touch. They come in different colors. You know, it was funny, they actually showed one while I was researching this. The guy actually drilled into it and you actually see some of them have multi-colors inside. I immediately got me chasing down rainbows and the number 42, but I won't go into that. So you're sitting over there and you're seeing the colors that come out that it actually produces. This guy knows what he's looking for. The kingdom of heaven is like someone who goes out seeking. And when he finds it, when he has it in his hand, when he knows the value of this thing, he gives up everything to have it. You with me? Right, we don't need to go there. All right, verse 47. It says, once more, the kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown in a lake. They caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen brought up the net onto the shore, sat down, collected the good fish in the baskets, and threw the bad fish away. So it will be at the close, at the close of the age. All right, let's pause before we go there. Last week I told you to go and look at the different types of fishing methods they would have used. Anybody come back with different types of nets? Okay. Describe it for me, Shoni. What would you do?
So I found two, but I don't remember the names. The one is just where they basically attach to, like in this parable, so it's a dragnet. They throw it right down to the bottom, and it's got like these weights on. It goes to the bottom of the ocean, that pulls across the ocean, gathering up whatever, so stones, whatever fish, not just a specific fish, it actually gathers up everything. And then they have to put it up, and then they sort out the fish.
All right. Are you thinking about the one we saw in Israel?
Yes.
Okay, that's called a cast net. Okay.
And then
When is that one used? No, that's a dragnet.
that is the dragon, that's the costing.
No. You get different ones. Okay, dragnet is one thing, a cast net is another. Okay. You see that one that is got going on there,
No,
right?
that's just thrown to the top, so that catch does
Yes, but where do I use that one? Where did we use it?
was in the more shallowy side.
Where we are? Who cast that net? No. When you were in Israel.
You never went fishing.
Tony, you're supposed to help me here. Alright, so we went on a boat with a guy by the name of Daniel Carmel. And he was not near the shore when he showed them how to throw out this net. Okay, now it's got little weights around. So what you do is you hook it up and you have to throw it in a way that it doesn't tangle, that it opens up. And then it lands in the water, but then it starts to sink. But they don't have really big weights on the bottom. It's attached to the guy's wrist, and he only lets it sink down for a little bit of a way, and then he'll give it a big yank, and when he gives it up, all the weights go to the bottom, and whatever is caught in there, they pull up. That is for mid-level fishing. You're not scraping the bottom. Why doesn't he want to scrape the bottom? You're going to get a whole bunch of things you can't eat. You're wasting your time. But not everybody has a boat, you see. So that is a cast net in which I can throw out, I can cast. Sometimes they would try from the shallows, but it's best used further in. The drag net, yeah, look at that shape. That's someone who throws it in properly. Okay? The drag net is when I can go off and I'll walk it in, and it's got weights at the bottom and a string at the top. And what I would do is I would use that to corner in the fish, and I would be able to come in and drag them to a point. Okay? That's like a serious one. It's normally like 1 or 2 guys. You walk in, you make a circle, you come back, and whatever's in that net, now you have to sort. What am I not looking for? Crabs, prawns, jellyfish. What am I allowed to eat according to Leviticus? Right? Something with fins and scales, right? So, if I find something that is not good, I capture, let's read the parable again with this knowledge, besides just using a hook, right? It says, once more the kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the lake that caught all kinds of fish. Let's see what we bring up. When it was full, the fishermen brought the net up onto the shore and then sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad fish away. There's a separation that takes place. Does it sound familiar? So it will be at the close, at the end of the age, the angels will go forth and separate the evil people from among the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace where they will wail and grind their teeth. Okay? Yeshua uses another interesting little parable. He says, you who are good who don't, or you who are bad who know how to give good gifts. He says, if I ask you for bread or a fish and you give me what? I'm butchering this, but check the verse. The snake. Now, how do we get there? How does that thing, how do those things like jump into your mind? Like, I ask you for a fish, you give me a snake, or was I ask you for bread and you give me a snake? How does that even work? Giving your children good gifts, but it's a fishing parable. So you're scraping through the bottom with a proper drag net. Do you think snakes are going to jump out from time to time? Yes. Problem. Okay? So you see this imagery in what he uses. Alright? Just go and check that verse. I'm sure I got it wrong. It's there or thereabouts. So what we're talking about here is he's saying there's going to be, the kingdom of heaven is someone, there's going to come a time when everything is going to come to a close, and at the end of the close there's going to be a separation again. Okay? Let's go to the next one. Have you understood all these things? Yes, they answered. He said to them, so then every Torah teacher who has been made into a talmid for the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a home who brings out out of his storage room both new things and old. Every Torah teacher that has been made into a disciple of the kingdom of heaven is like an owner of a home that brings out from his storage room both new things and old. What does that mean? If you're a disciple of the kingdom of heaven, you who study Torah, what are you going to be able to do?
I think you're going to be able to expand on Torah, prophets, writings, and point to Yeshua and explain the old and the new.
Right. you're going to be able to pull out of your storehouse something that you have, and you're going to be able to bring out to people and you say, you understood this, but did you really see this? Right. When Yeshua had finished his parables, he left and he went to his hometown. Right? You guys okay with the list we have so far? Okay. So just to recap, someone finds a hidden treasure, sells everything, gets it. Valuable pool, sells everything, gets it. Fishing net, there's going to be a separation at the end, some to destruction, some to be kept. And if you are a disciple of the kingdom of heaven, you will be able to understand these things. Okay, I want you guys to go with me to Matthew 18. Verse 23, if I wrote it down correctly. Matthew 18. I'm going to start from 21. But the verse actually starts to go into verse 23, right? So it says, so Matthew 18:21, it says, Then Kepha, Peter, came up and said to him, Rabbi, how often can my brother sin against me, and I have to forgive him? As many as 7 times. Not 7 times, answered Yeshua, but 77 times, or 7, what do you guys have there?
70 times 7.
70 times 7? Okay? 70 times 7. Okay, just to help us understand, where do we get that number? Where do we see that number up here? Is that what he's talking about? Forgiveness must be like 70 times 7. It's 490.
Well, they were kicked out of the land for that long because they didn't keep sheep and commandments.
Right, so if you keep on offending me, keep on offending me, keep on offending me, how many times must I forgive you? It says, remember your captivity and how I brought you back into the land? So you think are you okay with everything? You have done nothing wrong to offend God and He must forgive you every time, but when your brother offends you, you must ignore it? It says, guys, we need to act more like God here. It says, because of this, the kingdom of heaven may be compared with a king who decided to settle accounts with his deputies. Right away, they brought forward a man who owed him many millions, and since he couldn't pay, his master ordered that he, his wife, and his children, and all his possessions be sold to pay the debt. But the servant fell down before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will help pay back everything. So out of pity for him, his master let him go and forgave his debt. But as the servant was leaving, he came upon one of his fellow servants who owed him some tiny sum. He grabbed him and began to choke him. I think this brother had a tough day. Crying, pay back what you owe me. His fellow servant fell before him and begged. He said, be patient with me and I will pay you back. But he refused, instead had him thrown into jail until he should repay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were extremely distressed, and they went and told their master everything that had taken place. Then the master summoned his servant and said, you wicked servant, I forgave you all your debt just because you begged me to do it. Shouldn't you have had pity on your fellow servant just as I had pity on you? And in anger, his master turned him over to the jailers for punishment until he paid back everything he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat you unless you forgive your brother from your hearts. Okay, so interesting little parable dealing with obvious forgiveness. How many of you would think the guy who went to the king the first time was overly harsh? You think he was overly harsh?
At first, no, I don't think so.
You didn't think so. So,
Not until I saw it.
Okay, well, I want to take the whole thing into consideration. He went to the king, he owed him a lot of money. He said, I don't know what to do here, please forgive me. The king says, okay, you go. You grab a guy who owes you money, you start choking him, and then he says, be patient with me, and you throw him into jail. The guy who's doing the choking, how many of you think he was being over the top? How many of you think he was well within his right? Is this being recorded? Is this a trick question? How many of you would think, if that was you, you're standing before, you cannot pay your debtors because you haven't been paid. They come knocking on your door. You and your family, you're going to go work off your debt. You beg and you plead and you say, no, please, just give us more time, I'll get it sorted. They say, okay, don't worry about it. You walk down the road and you see someone who owes you money. What goes through your mind at that point? I'm going to choke him. What I want you to see here is that this man is no longer focusing on the great forgiveness of the king. He's focusing on how he felt. I could have given him some money. It's people like you who got me into trouble with the king. My family and I nearly got sold. It's your fault. You pay your debt late. What's he focusing on? How he felt. This man owed a tiny sum. Did it say that he owed the most of the sum? Owed R1 million, you owe me 5,000. Bank comes knocking. I choked the guy who owes me 5,000 rand. I'm saying, it's people like you that got me into that situation. Is it? You see, what Yeshua does here masterfully is he gets them to shift the focus. If you have been forgiven much, surely those people who offend you, you should overlook. If I am focused on who I was before God entered my life and how He opened up my eyes and all of the things I've done wrong, what should my response be to people who hurt me? Let me ask you something. In that moment, how many of you stop and go, but I've done worse? Or do you just go, that's hurt, that's mean, I can't believe you treat me like that? Oh, let that sink in a little. You fixate on how it makes you feel. And saying, but the king has forgiven you much worse. And you want to stand and you want him to be thrown into jail? You have forgiveness, and yet you carry unforgiveness for someone who did something so small. When you go and you stand before the king, what's he going to say? He's going to say, you had no mercy on him, so I'm not going to have mercy on you. Disciples' prayer, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who trespass against us. If I had to take the culmination of everything you've done wrong and I stood before a righteous judge, standing there and saying, this is me, every thought, every action, every broken statement, everything I've ever done wrong. If I had to stand before my Creator and I could point to you guys and say, yo, but they made me do it. They drove me crazy. After I came to knowledge and I came to faith and I came to this and all the rest of it, they made me sin that one time because they drove me nuts. What about the other 99 times, Vince? Yeah, but I wouldn't even be here. There's probably like 400 million circumstances that could have happened like that. How long do you think I would get away with that with God? You see, when we're dealing with each other, in this parable, he takes a completely different thing and he says, listen, I need you to see this for what it is. Your king has forgiven you so much more Surely you should have, if you've been shown mercy, you should reflect that. And say, you know what, that money that I was supposed to get, that I lent you, that you were supposed to give me, I was supposed to give to the king, but the king was gracious. And he forgave that debt. I know you're struggling as well, so don't worry about it. But instead, I'd rather feel justified by having you flogged. These are disciples that are walking with God in flesh and they're still missing the point of love. You start to understand those links when he says, take the log out of your own eye. He says, which one of you? If we were to be really honest with ourselves here, you get frustrated with the people around you. You look at other people and you go, oh, well, you know, their fruit is just not so great. So maybe we should distance ourselves from them because I don't really like this whole vibe. And that person and this, you know, maybe it's just... Can I use my rabbi's words and say, you without sin cast the first stone? You know? Yeah. Heard a funny post once. It's like walking in a gym complaining about fat people. The reason you're in gym is because you want to get better. It's like coming to church and moaning about hypocrites. Like, guys, you're not perfect when you walk in here. We're going to continue to ask God to work with us and hopefully hold each other accountable so we can do something about the fact that we are not in shape. And the guys that are looking really good at the gym, hopefully they've been doing this for a really long time so that they understand how this works. The people that are mature in fellowship, hopefully they've been doing this long enough to go, don't do it that way, that only hurts you. If you want to see real growth, do it this way. Don't waste your time on that stuff. I did it did nothing. Come, let's focus on this because this is going to get you somewhere. Unforgiveness? Oh man, that's a thing that's going to drag you down for years. If you cannot let go of what other people have done to you, I guarantee you cannot let go of the things you've done. Now what happens when you carry that and God says, can we please move on? I've let that go. Why haven't you? God can't love me because of what I've done or what that person has done to me, because I don't forgive them. That's rubbish. They spat in God's face and He removed them. They sat in another land. And God says, don't worry, I'm going to bring you back. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm a covenant-keeping God. He died for you, not because you deserve it, but because you need it. Don't think that you have this all figured out. You want to point the finger at someone else, do me a favor, point it back at you and think about all the horrible stuff you did where you hurt how many other people. And then look at that person again and saying it's your fault. You tell me you can honestly do that. I'm not talking about accountability. I'm not talking about trying to help that person. I'm not coming in, let me pick on Billy, saying, Billy's doing something silly. Me coming along the side and saying, listen buddy, have you thought this through? Instead, I'm so focused on how I feel about it that I lose sight on God's heart. You getting this parable? This illustration is very, very close. I want you to go to Matthew 20, from verse 1. The kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who went out at daybreak to hire workers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the workers on the wage of 1 denarius, okay, and that's basically a daily wage. The standard daily wage, he sent them off to his vineyard. Then on going out at about 9 in the morning, just ponder on that, he saw more men standing around the market square doing nothing. And he said to them, you go to the vineyards too, I'll pay you a fair wage. So they went at noon, and again around at 3 in the afternoon. He did the same thing. About an hour before sundown, he went out, found still others standing around, and he asked them, why have you been standing here all day long? No, nothing. They said, because no one's hired us. You too, he said, go to the vineyard. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the workers and pay them their wages, starting from the least ones hired and ending with the first. Now, why would he do that? Surely you would pay the guys who had been there the longest first, and then you pay the guys that only came in an hour ago last. Think about the hot condition. The workers who came an hour before sunset each received a denarius. So the workers who came first expected they would get more, but each of them also received just a denarius. On receiving their wages, they began grumbling to the farmer, these latecomers have worked only 1 hour while we have borne the brunt of the day's work in the hot sun. Yet you have put them on equal footing with us. But he answered one of them, look, friend, I'm not being unfair with you. Didn't you agree to work today for a denarius? Now take your pay and go. I choose to give the last worker as much as I've given you. Haven't I the right to do what I want with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? Thus the last ones will be first and the first ones last. What's the point?
Isn't it in the kingdom of heaven, those who were last on earth will come first? And
Why would they come first?
It's a picture of those that give their life to God, like on their deathbed, and those that have lived their life with God their whole life. Like they each going to inherit the same.
What are we going to? What is the reward for us today? What would you call that?
Your salvation.
Salvation.
Your right to be with God.
Right. So you get salvation. The guy who's been doing this for 5 minutes gets in, and you go, surely, I've been doing this for 20 years. Where's the VIP section? And he goes, what VIP section? So what is he showing about the hot condition of the people here? Are they happy that their brothers are being hired and they have enough money to feed their families or themselves? No, you're only focusing on this seemingly weak wage, which you agreed to do. The fact that you gave your life to God so that you could be saved. And now you're going, oh no, but I want more. He says, for what? I promised you salvation. We get so focused on other stuff. Yeah?
There was something else that came to mind for me was the thing about the workers, as in, it reminds me of the story of we are all part of the same body, so we are all equal, no matter if you're a teacher or an apostle or shepherd or whatever.
Yeah.
That came to mind. And then the thing about the 4 different times, that was interesting. I don't know. I was going to ask you about that because it could be also that it doesn't matter how old you are, that you can enter the kingdom whether you're 9 years old or, if you look at Samuel, he's called most when he was young as well.
Okay. I think the thing is, if you have the fact that this time that you have, that grace period, some of you are going to go through it for a really long time before you get your due diligence, your wage. Some of you might sneak in at the last minute. God forbid, right? I think we make a decision, we apply ourselves, we do the work that we've been called to do for God's glory, not your own. And if you are cemented, can you imagine me the guy sitting there going, the world's about to end, please hire me. I don't know about you, but when you start from that Daniel narrative, and when you start figuring out where we are, that we're busy in the toes, we're probably some near the end of the toenail around about now, according to God's timeline. I don't want to be around making an if, maybe, or but statement. I want my eternity to be secure, and the only way you do that is you give your life to God and you move forward. He promised you salvation. Guys, I like what Shawnee said, whether you're standing here teaching people or sitting, learning and applying, what do I want for you? I want salvation. What do I want for myself? I want salvation. Can we just be happy that we're going to get that? Or you're so busy focusing on how many crowns Richard's going to get versus how many crowns Uncle Al is going to get? Or we're just going to be happy that they're both saved? That's our narrative. There's an ad.
There's an interesting thing that comes to mind is that the thief on the cross, he's like, if we were looking at him going, excuse me?
Yeah.
He's right there. And Yeshua turns to him and says, today you will be with me. Just because he acknowledged. That's how simple it is. That's like the 11th hour if you
Yeah. We don't have to go through the mold to be saved. But you also don't have an excuse to run around and do whatever you feel like just because you haven't been through the mold. If you look at the way people come to faith and the different levels are, sometimes you're the first person to break the cycle in your family. You might be the second generation kid who grew up in church but never really made it your own because it was always your parents' thing. You might be the third generation thing where it was like, well, my opa was a Germany, my dad was a Germany, and I just haven't got this thing figured out. It's really weird that God, it's not weird, it's amazing. God will use different narratives to try and reach every and all people, but every single person has to make a choice. This isn't about one person's salvation yes, it does sort of affect the entire family, but each member of that family still has to make that choice. How are we doing for time? Are we over time?
No, the sun is still far from setting.
10 past 3. Then where we started late, right? Are you guys still okay? Want to do one more parable? Alright. Chapter 22. Yeah, I've got enough to keep you until 6, so we're going to get 25, 22, chill, bro. Just chill. We're going to go from 25 or 22 to 25 and then we're going tomorrow. So, hope you all have eaten. Verse 1, 22 verse 1, it says, Yeshua again used parables in speaking to them. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding feast for his son. But when he sent his slaves to summon the invited guests to the wedding, they refused to come. So he sent some more slaves, instructing them to tell the guests, look, I've prepared my banquet, I've slaughtered my bulls and fattened cattle, everything is ready, come to the wedding. But they weren't interested and went off, one to his farm, another to his business. The rest grabbed his slaves, mistreated them and killed them. The king was furious and sent out his soldiers who killed them, those murderers, and burned down their city. Alright, let's talk a little bit. The wedding feast is prepared. The son of the groom is there. Where's the bride? Hopefully at the wedding, right? It's not rocket science. Right? So he's going to collect who? Guests. People who are there that are supposed to witness this. Daddy knows, the groom knows, the bride is already there. If the guests who are supposed to be joining, where do they go? What is their excuse? No, your translation says they have. Interesting. All right. So yeah, he goes in and he goes and he says, the banquet is ready. And another guy says, no, I'm not interested. Another one went to his business. Another one decided to slap around the king's servants. Isn't that an interesting turn? And eventually he sent soldiers out and he says, that's it. Says, then he said to his slaves, well, the wedding feast is ready. But the ones who were invited didn't deserve it. So go out to the street corners and invite to the banquet as many as you find. Slaves went out into the street, scattered all the people they could find, the bad along with the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. Bad and good brought in together in a room. Does that echo any other parable that we might have read? Now when the king came to look at his guests, he saw there was a man who wasn't dressed for the wedding. So he asked him, friend, how did you get in here without wedding clothes? Now apparently there was an ancient custom, I can't back this up, that when you came into the wedding, you received a special garment. He came in, he doesn't have his salvation clothes on, he's not pure white, he's one of the bad fish or a tear. This man was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, bind him hand and foot and throw him outside in the dark. In that place people will wail and grind their teeth, for many are invited but few are chosen. Guys, there's a call. Now in my mind I want to be part of the bride. Only God can decide that. I'm going to try and do what I can, focusing on what He tells us to do. But I think what He's talking about, Jay, is He's looking at the people and He's saying, you're supposed to be part of something amazing. Talking to this Pharisee or that Sadducee or the people of Israel that don't really yet understand who He is, and they're saying, come, something amazing is happening, and they're saying, who are you again? I don't really want to deal with you. But whose authority are you? And we have all these questions about, everybody else understands what's going on here. And yet they spurn, knowing that this is the case. And there's this weird little shift in He's saying, listen, if you don't get on board, soldiers are coming. Can I think of anything that happened after Messiah where I saw soldiers coming? Destruction at the temple in 70 AD. He told them, He says, when you see them surround Jerusalem, He told the believers, He said, run, get out the city, and many of them did, and they were safe. And when people came back, there was only destruction. For those who didn't understand Him, didn't listen, destruction came. It's a really interesting way to make a similar point. But he starts to lead to an illustration. From here he goes into, a little bit later, Matthew 24, where it talks about end times, and next week we're going to talk about Matthew 25. So next week I want you guys to mark down. I want you to look at Matthew 25, and I want you to go to Mark 4. You can read from verse 21 to 29. Matthew 25 is the parable of the 10 young virgins, or let's just go with that. And Mark 4 from verse 21 to 29. These are the last two parables we're going to look at the kingdom of heaven. And I want you to just make a little side note on a separate piece of paper. Okay? All of just a practical point for you. What do you get out from each parable? Okay? I want to understand how this impacts you. And then from there, we're going to go into the statements about the kingdom of heaven. Mostly in Matthew, believe it or not. That's where the bulk of it comes from. Okay? I'll see if I can send those out for you so you guys can do a little bit of reading. But I really want to focus on the parables for now. Okay? Any questions, any thoughts? Anything online? How many people? Enough. Okay. Alright, you guys happy? That's the process. Hopefully, guys, I'm really hoping that we're not just getting lost in the parables and we're actually hearing God's heart in the midst of the parable, yeah? Okay. Alright, you guys want to stand so we can say so we can pray? And we will say that blessing. This Bible. I'm going to have to retire it. Alright, I'm going to pray and then we're going to do the Aaronic. Father, we just want to thank you again for this time together as family. Father, we thank you for your love and your guidance, and I just pray that these words, Father, that you have given us as we have studied your word would not just go into our minds, Father. Father, with us it's just words, but with your Ruach, there's heart change, Father, there's mind change, there's feet change, there's transformation that takes place. Father, I pray that you continue to help us to be mindful of the kingdom. Help us, Father, to set aside time to spend with you. Help us, Father, to get our priorities right. Help us to be merciful to others. Help us to be forgiving. Help us to understand that you are busy with so many different people at so many different levels, Father, and we are no better than anybody. Help us to be accountable, Father. Help us to hold on to you. And Father, we just pray that as a body, Father, as a group of people, we just pray for those that are here and those that aren't. Father, I pray that you would be able to just lay on their hearts, Lord Father, the importance of this holy convocation, this time together, that the body should not be separate, but Father, that we should operate as one. Father, I pray that you would give us the boldness and the courage to be able to talk about your truth wherever we go and wherever we are. Father, I pray that we live lives worthy, that we would be true kingdom of priests. Father, sons and daughters. Father, help us renew our minds so that we may focus and think about things that would please you. And we just thank you again, Lord, for choosing us, for your forgiveness, and this time you've given. We pray that our lives may bring you glory as living sacrifices, Father. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Yaverecha Yehovah v'yishmerecha. Yair Yehovah panav elecha v'echoneka. Yisai Yehovah panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.